Okay, thank you very much. So welcome back for our afternoon session. And I just want to mention about the beautiful Swift biscuits on the table that you have now. So they are made by our wonderful artist Sabine Springer, who created our beautiful Welcome Swift and all the Swifts around, and this Welcome Swallows. Yeah. And just to mention that they are made with spelt flour and eggs and butter, so just if you have a dietary requirement, just so you know. So it's my great pleasure to welcome our new chairperson for this afternoon, and that's Dr. Cilian Roden. And Cilian is a very good friend. He's a fantastic expert on a plant at the bottom of our lake, Loch Carra. And he's also, he was also Yarrick's internal supervisor, because Cilian was lecturing at ATU Galway until fairly recently. So I'm going to hand you over to Cilian. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Linda didn't explain to you her rather strange way of running the world. The conference, as I understand it, is to talk about a bird species which hardly ever puts its feet on. Hello, hiya. But strangely, as her chairman for this afternoon, she chose somebody who does study birds. He studies plants. And not only that, he does study them when they grow into the air. He studies them underwater. So, as an underwater botanist chairing a meeting of aerial ornithologists, as they say, let's go. But I just love about this conference is the huge variety. That we've seen good science, but also a huge emphasis on the emotional connection between observer and observed. And quite simply, after 50 years in ecology, if we don't get that right, we lose everything. So, thank you very much for letting me chair the meeting. Now, I'll hand you over to James, who is at the moment a postdoc researcher down in University College Cork. He does a lot of work in different varieties of birds, especially grouse and woodcock. And before that, he studied for a PhD in Queen's and Belfast. So I hand you over to James. Okay, thank you. You're up.
Thank you very much. As mentioned there, my career birds are ground nesting birds, but my passion is swifts. So really, when it gets to this time of year, I really should be following what my grouse are doing out in the hills at the moment, hatching their eggs, dodging foxes. But honestly, my eyes are to the sky at the moment. So I'm going to give a talk about a project that I'm currently doing with swifts. It's absolutely absorbed my month of May for the past 2 years. My head has been spinning the last couple of weeks with all the things that have been happening. I gave quite a similar talk at the UK Swift Conference last year, so if you were present for that, I've got good news for you, because there's hot, juicy gossip from 2026. And so I'll get into it here. So I should say that the opening photo there is quite a nice, calm, serene photo of a pair of swifts being lovely to each other. It doesn't stay like that. So yeah, let's get into it. So cameras in nest boxes. What a fabulous invention! Whoever came up with that, just genius. I mean, it's hard to take your eyes away. But like anything that sort of starts to satisfy our curiosity, by God, does it start to bring up new questions. And if you are yourself watching swifts on camera in their nest boxes, you can't have failed to notice that there are things that happen. And what is the true nature of those things that we see? Like, when a bird arrives into a box and then disappears for a few days and then seemingly comes back, or when you get 3 birds in a box at once, or a big fight, or eggs being tossed. What's happening? And the traditional belief is that swifts are really, really loyal to their nest sites. They come back year after year after year. They come back to their partner year after year after year. They're really, really monogamous for their lifetime. And these sort of things that we see early in the season when the swifts arrive back, that didn't really gel with me, with the whole idea of swifts being highly monogamous. So this is really what I set out to study in detail. So just an introduction to the study colony where I'm working at. It's actually been mentioned already by Yarrick and Chris in their talks yesterday. It's in Maguire's Bridge. It's owned by the wonderful John and Georgina Young, who are sadly couldn't be here for the conference this week. But we owe a great deal to them for this work. They are set in rural County Fermanagh, about 6 kilometres from the next town with swifts, so it's quite an isolated colony. And that's good, because that means that everything that happens in the area with swifts, we know about it. Their colony started in 2013. They had breeding in the very first year, which again, just extraordinary luck. Some people get all the luck, and since then it's snowballed up to around 32 pairs in 50 boxes, with about 70 young swifts fledged annually, which, if Chris is wondering where all the young swifts in Ireland come from, I'd say a good number of them come from the young colony. Every single box has an HD camera, and John has kept very, very detailed records since the very beginning of all the hatching dates, laying dates, arrival dates, and departure dates. And of course, it has already contributed to excellent swift science already, with Yarrick having published his paper in Irish Birds. So this is what I stare at every evening just before bed and through the day, looking for things that sort of are happening and what's going on in new arrivals. These are the 50 cameras. There are actually only 48 shown there. There's another 2. It was some job to get all that set up. For me, who's not particularly techie, it took me a couple of years, and it was a couple of years in building up this camera system. Well worth it in the end. All footage is recorded. We've got about 84 terabytes of hard drives recording through the summer all the footage so that we can then go through it all in the wintertime. And then extra handy for me, because I'm living down in Cork in the south of Ireland, I can sit in my home in Cork and watch what's happening in a swift colony on the other side of Ireland, which is either good or bad for my productivity, really. Just a note about the nestlings in the colony. I ring all the nestlings. We've had 472 young swifts ringed since 2019. It just goes to show how, this colony is really pumping out chicks, young swifts. And there is a fairly low rate of return. So in all that time, we've only had about just over 2% of chicks actually returning to the colony to breed. In addition to that, I should say a bird that Mark Smith ringed in his colony in Antrim, 85 kilometres away, is now breeding in the colony as well, which is a great data point. So we know where one young swift has dispersed from its fledging site to its breeding site. These returning birds are really, really highly valued in the colony. So their exact life histories are known. And in fact, there's one bird in the colony which is a real favourite of mine, and we have seen him every single year from fledging right through to this year. He's 6 years old now, And in the very first year, for example, or when he was 1 year old, I actually photographed him in the air, flying around the colony as a banger. And he was actually drooping his legs, and we could read the code on his ring from the photo. I think it has to be the first recovery of a ringed swift from a photograph taken of it in flight. From this, we've also had one foreign recovery, a bird that was ringed in 2023, and it was found dead in the Netherlands 7 days after fledging. Those young birds don't hang around. Hot news from last week, we had one bird which I actually photographed as a chick, yellow PS, fledged in June 2023 and has returned last week to pair up with one of our single males, and it's great to see her back. So that's just a bit of happy news from very recent times. So I only started then ringing the adults in 2024. We just wanted to take a cautious approach to it. When we started to see that the chicks were starting to return, and we could see that there was value in being able to read the rings with the cameras, we then started ringing the adults, and this is where the real value comes in. So the initial aims of this were really to determine annual survival rates. So that's part of a BTO project. It's what's called a retrapped adult survival project. So that means that every year we get an idea of the annual survival rates, return rates, and that's really important. And that's something that we really don't know very much about on a continuous basis in the UK and Ireland. There's old published survival figures, but there's very little work actually in the UK looking at survival rates into the future, and obviously there's concerns around climate change and other sort of big weather events that might have effects on them, so it's quite important. And crucially, I wanted to study colony dynamics and interactions, and this is the real good stuff. So I had I devised a fairly targeted capture method. I used a little tiny mist net on big long mist net poles, and that's on a rope and pulley system. So when the birds exit the boxes, let's say first thing in the morning, I know exactly which bird I'm getting because I can see that it's on the camera, that it's about to jump out of the nest. So I put the net up very quickly. It flops into the net out of the box, and I pull the ropes, and down it comes, and I'm able to ring it quickly. And I only ring the adults late in the season around fledging time, so I'm not causing major disturbance to their chick rearing process, ideally after the chicks have fledged, if possible. And then I use the nest cameras to read the colour rings, and this is great because it means that the bird only has to be captured once in its lifetime, and from then after we're able to capture all of its activities within the colony. I take small body feather samples for DNA sexing, so we know the sexes of all the birds, male or female. And it has been really, really successful. Almost all the adults in the colony are ringed, which is good because if there were unringed birds pinging around the colony, they'd cause havoc with me not knowing who they are. So I made special effort to try and get every bird ringed. So just to comment on the return rates, the survival, 2025, 83%. That sort of tracks with the figure that Chris gave us of adult mortality rates, which was 17%. That maybe seems like an average. 2026, 92% return rate for a migratory bird that goes halfway across the world, for 92% of those birds to survive and come back to the place of breeding. That's an incredible survival rate. You compare that with swallows or house martins, that figure's more like 40 to 60%. So swifts are really good at looking after themselves on migration, or at least this colony was from 2025 to 2026. Additionally, nearly every bird, so around 98% of them, initially arrives back into the same box that they used in the previous year. That's going to change. That changes through the season, but on arrival, nearly every single bird returns to the box that they used last year. And then we start to see some of the interesting data that comes out of this. So this is I think, going to answer a question that maybe some people might have had, and it's certainly a question that I had. If a bird is early one year, is it more likely to be early the next year? Do each bird have an individual strategy? And in this graph, we can see on the vertical axis is the number of days from 20th of April 2025, and bottom axis is the same but for 2026. And this is just plotting the arrival dates for individual birds, known ringed birds in the colony in those 2 years. And there's a very, very high correlation. So we see that if you're a bird that is more likely to that arrived early in 2025, then you are also likely to arrive early in 2026. Now, whether that is down to personal strategy or whether it's more to do with the age of the bird, that's something that I think can only be teased out after a good few years of this kind of data. But already it shows something really, really interesting with sort of each individual bird. I have to include this clip because I love it. This is a bird newly arrived into the colony after months of being on the wing, and he was ready for a nap. So at this point, I have to give a public service announcement for the male swifts in the colony. I really, really advise that if you want any kind of domestic happiness, you arrive to your nest before your female does. Otherwise, things might start going wrong for you. And the good news is that most of the male swifts actually do arrive back into the colony. So I'll show you another interesting chart here. This is showing arrival into the colony in 2025 and 2026. The orange is males, the blue is females. The vertical axis is how many birds are in the colony, and then the date, so basically late April through May along the bottom axis. And it just shows the number of birds in the colony over time. And, well, there's just so much you can say about this particular plot here. First of all, males on average are arriving before the females. You can see that there's very definitely, the males are well ahead of the females in their arrival in both 2025 and 2026. And then we can look at the difference between the years. So this was an interesting year compared to 2025. So 2025 was very steady, I would say, a very, very sort of steady trickle of birds coming through. The slope is quite regular for both male and female until it plateaus at the end of May. Whereas 2026 came in fits and starts, so there's a very early contingent around, well, starting on the 20th of April this year, actually earlier than 2025. Then it stagnated with no arrivals. Then there was a bit of a peak at the very end of April, which then kind of stagnated again. And then it wasn't really until the 19th of May, when that horrible north wind that we were having, that ceased, and we got winds from the south again, and bam, all the swifts arrived. And, well, I should say that's quite relevant, because that kind of disparity in arrival dates could cause serious drama in a colony because of impatience of the birds that arrived first. First I'll say that sometimes females do get home first before their male, and that's when interesting things start to happen. So if you look at these 4 images, that looks like, you can see the dates, April 30th to May 2nd. That looks like 4 happily paired swifts in their nest boxes. You'd be wrong, I'm afraid. The female is the same bird in each of these boxes. This female arrived home on April the 29th within Within 4 days of arrival, she had already gone around 4 different males in the colony. She had no patience for her partner. And it wasn't until the 5th of May that her original partner from the previous year had actually arrived. And there he is. He's looking out. He can see someone he knows out there. In she comes. A bit of, where were you? And then he gets very excited and starts saying, "How are you, my dear?" Not knowing that she was shacked up with 4 different males in the previous few days. And it didn't stop there, because in the days after their reuniting, she actually kept touring around some of those males, and then finally made a decision to settle down with him in the end. So she really hedged her bets. It's not just the girls that behave badly. I thought so last year, because a lot of the drama was coming from the girls last year. But 2026 showed it to be a bit different. So this fine gentleman is male F9. He lives in box High Eaves 2, or he nested there in 2025. He arrived on the 27th of April. He roosted overnight in his box for a couple of nights and then kind of got a bit bored. So he went and visited K4 in Gable 4, a nice girl waiting for her partner, on the 29th of April, so 2 days later. And look at that smug wee look on his face. He's delighted with himself. Well, this is how it ended up. So he got into 2 full-blown fights with another male, and that's not the original male from Gable 4. That's another wandering male, impatient, and had his eye on that female as well. And in both instances, F9 got booted out, and he retreated back to his own box, High Eaves 2, and spent another night there, sort of nursing his wounded pride. And I should say that the other male involved in that fight got booted out of that box again a few days later, when the original male of Gable 4 came home. The female, by the way, during these fights, she just sits back and watches it all happen. She says, "You boys let it all work it out, so I'll just pair it with whoever wins." So she's easy. 1st of May, F9 tried his luck again in Gable 1. I should say, John Young likes to put paintings, he calls it the Swift National Gallery, in all the boxes. It gives the birds something to look at while they're incubating, because incubation is really, really boring for swifts. This particular one's a scream. I don't think I'd like to sit and sleep next to the scream, but he, he has a lot of lovely classical paintings up in his nest boxes. Anyway, that's another very satisfied look on F9's face there on the 1st of May. 2 days later, after consorting with Z9 in Gable 1, oh dear, he got caught with his pants down. That is F9 getting his butt kicked. So, yes. So F9, with his pride now seriously wounded, because that was the original male of Gable 1, F9 retreated to his box in High Eaves 2. This is the same day as that fight you just saw, and fortunately for him, his wife came home. And here's the reception he got. How are you, dear? Oh, I'm okay. Who have you been consorting with this year? What have you done with the place? I'm not sure about that painting there. but they did settle down, and they laid 3 eggs, which are due to hatch in a couple of days' time. But it doesn't always work out like that. So, you know, they don't always get back together with the same partner, which I'll cover in a moment. And so in 2025, 30% of the birds did this kind of behavior. They spent time with multiple partners of opposite sex before actually pairing up. So some of the females spent time with up to 5 different males until they actually paired up. And as I mentioned before, 4 of those females actually continued to regularly visit other males in their boxes after pairing up. So I don't believe there's any loyalty in a swift colony, to be perfectly honest. Everyone's out for themselves. Divorce. So just to give you some definitions here, there is divorce in a colony. Pair retention is when both members of a pair from the first year return and then breed together in the second year. So that's what we expect, monogamy. Divorce is the return of both members of a pair, but no longer breeding together. And repartnering is only one member of a pair returning, and so they must find a new partner due to the assumed mortality of their previous partner. So here's the stats for 2025. 29% divorce rate in the colony, with 32% mate retention and 38% repartnering. That was to do with slightly higher mortality rate over the winter between 2024 and 2025. So, I mean, that divorce rate is way higher than even I expected. It's certainly higher than what you get in other studied species of swifts in Europe. The pallid swift has a divorce rate of around 16 to 20% in studied colonies, while the alpine swift has a divorce rate of, I think, 10 to 15%. Common swift, 30%. They're not doing it right at all. 2026 changed a little bit. We have much higher retention rates in this year compared to 16% divorce rate. What I would say is that is not for lack of trying to divorce, because there was a lot of partner swapping this year, and there were a lot of fights. And I would say that the only reason that retention rate is as high as it is this year is because some birds really, really did not back down when they saw that their partner was with another bird, and they fought tooth and nail, or beak and nail, to make sure that they were staying in their box. So, yeah, I'd say that divorce rate is quite low this year. In fact, I should say that pie chart for 2026 is out of date as of yesterday, because we had a late arrival of a female 2 days ago that arrived into her box to find her male shacked up with another lady. This did not go over well, and they launched into each other. This was at 6 o'clock in the morning. They fought for 9 hours. Their legs were torn and bloody, and neither were backing down. They broke apart, exhausted, left the box, and there was no obvious winner. 5 hours later, come dusk, they were back in the box fighting, and they fought until after midnight, and again, no real clear winner. Then yesterday morning, back they came again, fought it out once more, and the usurper actually was the one who won that fight and kicked out the original occupant, the original female of that box. And again, as I say, the male just sits back, lets it all happen. Sometimes he flies out, gets a feather, comes back in, sticks it down to the nest. He just doesn't get involved at all. So these divorces seem to happen for several reasons. I don't think that we can really put our finger on sort of an overall pattern, at least not yet, this early in the study. So I would say probably the biggest reason for divorce is the disparity in arrival dates between partners. Swifts are not patient birds. They are under pressure to get breeding, get going, because they don't want to be still here in September. And so that first partner that arrives becomes impatient, goes and visits other birds or invites birds back into their own box. And I think that is a big reason for the divorce. Sometimes you can just get a a spontaneous change in nest box by one of the partners. We saw this last year when a male just decided out of the blue, no, I don't like this box anymore, I'm going down there, do you want to join me, dear? And she says, no, I prefer our box. And so they split up. And actually that then contributed to the next reason for divorce, because of outside influence by other homewrecker Swifts. Because when he changed his preference for that box and went down into the other box, that box belonged to another pair of Swifts. And he went in and said, this is mine, what are you going to do about it? And he won that box in a fight, kicked out the resident male, and this actually caused a ripple effect through the colony that actually affected a third of the boxes in the colony, because when he went and kicked that resident male out of the box, the resident female was so disturbed by the whole thing that she went, ooh, I don't like this anymore, and she started visiting different males in the colony, and she started causing trouble herself. Then that male that was booted out started causing trouble in other boxes, and there was just like this chain reaction through the colony. So home wrecker and colony wrecker, I would call it. And then one divorce last year was totally spontaneous. I can't explain this. 14th of May, Eve's 1, happy pair. They were together in the previous year. Eve's 2, single bird. His partner hadn't arrived back yet. By the next morning, she was like, no, I like that chap instead. I'm going to go pair with him this year. And left that poor chap in Eve's 1 all alone. And he was so heartbroken, he didn't actually get a partner again that year and spent the entire season alone in his box. Didn't breed. Whereas the neighbour raised 3 chicks and was quite happy. Oh, that pair, I should say, in Eve's 2 this year. Drama. I won't go into it now, but things mostly settled by June, when most birds had paired and laid eggs, but of course, not always the case. We see this here. This was a jealous neighbour. Kicked the egg out like a football, threw the other egg out. Yeah, we haven't seen an awful lot of that in the last couple of years, but it does happen, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of it in the future. So I just leave you with one last story, which, most of this drama is happening in the early part of the season when the birds are pairing up. But drama can happen later in the season too. So this is a story from July. What happens if an adult dies, leaving its partner as a single parent with chicks? And, a lot of us with cameras and boxes maybe have had the misfortune to actually see this. And the usual answer is, the single parent will attempt to raise the chicks solo, but not always, as you'll see. So, rest in peace, FU. FU was a bird that was actually fledged as a chick from the colony. I ringed him as a chick, 4-year-old male, taken by the sparrowhawk. He left behind his partner, EJ, also a chick fledged from the colony, and his 3 beautiful chicks. So here's his partner feeding the chicks. They're all fairly well advanced, not quite fledging age yet. The usual rough and tumble. This is the 9th of July. She comes in. It's every chick for himself. A scrum. So she was doing a good job. But the next day, 10th of July, a strange male came into the box. And as you'd expect, that's her. You can see that's the wing of the male sort of under the camera. She kicked his butt, and rightly so. And she sent him packing out of the box. The wee chick sort of watching in horror. That's a chick down the entrance tube, by the way, looking at the entrance. She sent him packing, but the next day he returned. He clearly thought he had something going on here. And amazingly, that's her on the left, that's him on the right, and he's just gingerly saying hello. She says, Hello. And she tolerates him. She tolerates him in her nest box, and he is not the father of the chicks. And with that sudden toleration of him, he sprung into action. So here he is, comes out the tunnel, walks around, that's a chick in the nest. And what does he do? Harasses all the chicks down the tube to the entrance. And now, that's the job nearly done. That's the mother on the nest. She's present in the box now. That's him on the right. And he goes down the tube to finish the job. Out you go. This is my nest now. You're not welcome. Fly or die, he doesn't care. And she just sits and watches him. There we go, that's the last chick just dropped out. We know at least one of those chicks died at the hands of the sparrowhawk. We don't know the fate of the others. We probably all of them died. But sorry. No one was home at the time, so we found a pile of feathers at the sparrowhawk plucking post, but other than that. And then the next day, 12th of July, that's the pair of them cuddled up together. And it raises a very, very interesting question. This conflict of instincts is for her to continue to raise the chicks and try to get them off and fledge and have her own reproductive success for that year? Or should she listen to her instinct of trying to secure a new partner? We actually had another case of this last year where the female was actually inviting the strange male into her box and then immediately turning around and fighting him as soon as he came in. So there seems to be a real conflict of instinct here. So just fascinating insight into sort of the behavior. And it kind of makes sense in a long-lived, slow-reproducing bird that they want to prioritize those pair bonds. But it seems strange that they wouldn't just finish the job of raising the chicks first before bringing in a new partner. So just to finish off, just to say sort of our future plans, we want to continue the study into the medium to long term with a view to publishing this in peer-reviewed journals. I think it's a fascinating look at swift courtship behavior. In the process of expanding effort to another site, which is ongoing in Kildare, at Dermot Doran's colony in Kildare. If you thought the drama's bad in the Maguire's Bridge colony, I think of all the pairs that Dermot had last year, there's one pair this year that is the same as last year. That's another story altogether. And what I'm interested in looking at is the parentage of the chicks, and is there extra pair paternity? Do these females, for example, that tour around the different males in the colony, do they actually have different fathers for their chicks? So I'll be taking DNA samples from the chicks this year to try and get an answer to that question. Just finally, just a shout out to John and Georgina Young for being such wonderful hosts, for being such fantastic Swift ambassadors, and for staring at the screen at the Swift nests for even longer than I do. To Alan McCarthy for helping to set up of Birdwatch Ireland to help set up the camera system. Aoife Walsh, who's in the audience here, she's a student at UCC who helped me troll through the footage and to pick out all the detail. And also to Mark Smith for, I think, sort of conceptualizing and putting into practice for this the whole concept of coloring swifts, because this wouldn't be successful without that idea. So I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for listening.
Good for you. Excellent talk. Now, I can't resist this one. I said before Michael talked to us that, or James talked to us, that I loved the combination of science and art that's here, but I can't help suggesting now an art form that has yet to be developed is chick lit. You've all the material there for you. On that point, can I introduce Michael Helm from the United States, who's going to tell us what things are like on the other side of the Atlantic. Michael, you're very welcome.
And now, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And now for something completely different. My name is Mike Helm. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area in the United States, and I'm here representing our team that monitors the migration of the Voxa swift through a brickyard at San Rafael. I'm going to do an update of things that I've done before, so those of you who were here in the past have heard more about our site and more about our detailed problems, and the many new faces, or the people who just kind of forgot. I hope it won't be too elusive, but I won't go into too much detail about the site. But this is our plan. You start out with the Tom Swifty. They're storming our site. Tom thundered. That's pretty much the same story that's been going on, only more so. There'll be a little diversion into talking about our community, and then some new details about what's going on in our site, how well we've been doing with the fall spectacle, a plot twist, and another plot twist. And finally, tomorrow I'll be talking more about another initiative we're doing, which is trying to listen to them and learn more. So you've seen this picture before. Diane had a version of it. The only thing I want to emphasize here is that our birds are tiny compared to the common swift, and I think that probably influences why they want to roost rather than stay airborne all the time. This is our site. This is a 120-year-old brickyard complex. These chimneys have been happily abandoned for nearly a century in some cases, and the birds have been using them forever, although it wasn't known to birders or ornithologists for a long time. And our context is we're near San Francisco. This is actually an estuary, not really a bay, but it's called San Francisco Bay, and we are right on the edge of the pure breeding area and the pure migration zone. So we have breeding territory nearby, and south of us is pure. The birds are only seen in migratory season, which is spring and fall. This is what happens. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay, this is what things look like at our peak. This happened to be a night when they decided to use all three chimneys. That's kind of unusual. It didn't happen so much this year. This one is often the overflow chimney, and we'll see some more of this later. So now for a diversion. Community relations is actually pretty important with this site. This is a kind of a technological museum because of the ancient chimneys that are there, but it is also two thriving businesses. One is a quarry site, and the other is the modern version of the brickyard, a family business. If you knew the people in the picture, you know that one of the business owners is here. We've had a lot of work getting them to come around, to be friendly to our activities and to be friendly to us, but things are going very well. And some of the inspiration for that came from here. We can't do some of the things that Diane talked about, the Vox's Happening project was able to do in the Pacific Northwest, where they had festivals and family outings and so on. These are very publicity-shy businesses, and we still have to be very careful, but we've really worked on that in the last couple of years, and things are going well. That way we can get in our ornithologists and scientific researchers, we can get in birders, and they can cooperate with thriving businesses and actually appreciate the other side of this, which is this architectural industrial history site that we have. But now for what we do. So this graph is maybe a little bit of an eye test. When I came the last time, it just showed this part. We've actually doubled the number of birds we see for the entire season again. And I don't know how we're going to be able to sustain this effort, and I'm not going to talk into what our difficulties are. This whole protocol is dependent on this device, which is a tally counter, which you might see when your kids get on a bus for a field trip or something of the sort. This is my wife, Brenda, demonstrating our counting technique. This is my nightly graph from last year. These are the nightly totals that were taken. There were several nights with more than 100,000 birds counted, which is mini counters looking at 3 chimneys, and that means 10,000 or so clicks of different counters of these. We wear these out during the year. This protocol is really not designed for our system, but we make it work. We're trying to do other things. This is my report card about what we were trying to do last year. I have something new, which is it's kind of related to the talk that Hannah and Ben gave about doing passive acoustic monitoring, but we do something a little bit different. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I have a little bit to say about it now. We worked a bit on trying to do a timing protocol, which would be timing the rate of bird entry into each of these chimneys, and that has been a total flop. People do not trust it. We have a lot of variable rates. We have different chimneys to count on. We really haven't figured out how to make this work. I haven't given up on it completely, and I don't think anybody else has, but we don't really know the right method for making it work and under what circumstances we can use it. It would certainly be better if it did work, because it would make the work of the counters a lot simpler, and we might be able to deal with this problem, getting more people to come in and help us with this, because people find this very intimidating to do for hours at a time. We have a plot twist. We have overwintering swifts. I don't think this is often recorded on the West Coast, and I don't know about our cogener species on the East Coast, the chimney swift, because the climate is a bit different and their range is different. In the fall of 2024, which is after the last conference, we had a small group that stayed after. We lost track of them because our winter season is the rainy season, and we have a Mediterranean climate. And it got very, very wet, and we just simply lost track of them. Nobody could get out to it. This year, we had a relatively large flock, and I will show you why they are difficult to track in a minute if the video will play. Now, our climate is pretty good. Further north, things would get very unpleasant for a bird hanging around. But in our area, we actually had a tropical heat wave in March, where it was warm like it was a few days ago here. And these birds, this flock, made a very good bet, I'm sure, because there was probably plenty of food and the climate was really good. We don't really know why they did this and whether this will continue. And the other question is, have they always been doing it? And we just haven't been able to see them or didn't notice them before. By overwintering, I mean after the 1st of November. That's usually the start of our rainy season, and that's when I think they're really not there. Generally speaking, we do not do spring counts. Partially it's because of the personnel. They have other things to do in the spring, and partially it's because of the weather. That's our rainy. Again, that runs into our rainy season. April and early May is still rainy in the San Francisco Bay Area, so nobody will go out. But it's also the birds. The birds are very erratic. This year, I happened to be out there working on the audio stuff, and I recorded the 2 highest counts we've ever had out there. And these are significantly higher than anything we've ever seen in the spring, even with our erratic attendance. But given that our site has at least tripled in the number of birds that it sees in the fall, is that all that surprising? And you notice these numbers are small. I said we had some 100,000 bird nights in the fall. This is nothing like that. But it's still an impressive number of birds. We're going to be able to get audio data about our spring migration, so we'll at least have some data. We haven't really gone through it. I looked at it a little bit before I left, but I cut off at the 1st of May. It looks inconsistent, like we always suspected. It may be that we actually, the spring migration may be very different in our area, and it's waves. Birds come in waves and don't stay long. This is what the overwintering birds do. 1, 2. That's 200 birds in 3 seconds. I wasn't even paying attention to this. I didn't see them until I edited the video. They're so fast, and they're so quiet, and you can tell by the relatively poor white balance, it's pretty dark. They came in late in the evening. This is January, I think, this particular one. So the light is really poor. I don't often get formations. Our birds do a lot of murmurations and a lot of strange structures, as well as fly around like a giant ball of gnats. But this is a typical formation, this kind of torus that they make. And they will often do that right before they go in. They do other things, but the way I have the camera set up, I rarely see anything else. There are other people have gotten other pictures, and I think Diane has shown some, and I've shown some from other places in the past. This is the wrong chimney. For years, of the 3 chimneys that we have, only one was used. And in the past couple of years, they've started to use the other 2. This is the wrong chimney. And at first they used it fitfully, here and there over the years, and now it's become a full partner. So we have 2 chimneys that are used roughly equally, and here they are storming it. Now this is 2 minutes from one of our peak nights. These are 2 different cameras, and they're roughly at the same time. I didn't bother to synchronize them either at the time or when I edited the video. But you can see the cameras have different ideas of what the light level should be. They're really old DSLR video cameras. But this gives you some idea of what it can look like. This was one of those nights where they eventually used the second chimney, which is a little bit hard to see on this screen, maybe show up better on the TV. They eventually used this one, and they like to use this one after dark. It's like the overflow parking. And I have, for this particular day, I think I have about 5 hours of this stuff. This went on and on and on, into from mid-afternoon into the dark. And as you can see, this chimney is the oldest of the 3. And this is the one that they used for a decade exclusively. And this one, they never used. And now they use it all the time. And there's no difference in the condition of the chimneys. They're completely ignored by the site. While I was editing the film over the past winter, I started to notice something. I wonder if you notice it too. Let's see if I can get this tandem one to work right. So look how the birds are dropping into the chimney with the strategy that they use. You see that? It's kind of like this. Do you know hummingbirds? Hummingbird hover? This is the hummingbird hover. These guys can hover like hummingbirds. Maybe not very well, but they can do it. And this is one of the ways that they get into the chimney. Let's see. This is not the best version of it on this side. But look, see if you see a different strategy here. It might take a second here. Like right there. That's not hovering. They dive in. And you'll see some of that here too, that they just dive in, they don't drop in. They seem to have 2 different strategies for getting into the chimney, and I think because Swifts have a very unique aerodynamic system, the divers can do something that ordinary birds cannot do. They can change the shape of their wings rapidly, and they're not torn off or damaged. They can just pop up and land on their spot in the chimney inside. So I have, in another version of this talk, I show a bigger chunk of that other one, but it isn't set up right for this particular talk, so that's the end. And thank you. This should work to get you this presentation and some others that are related to it.
An excellent talk, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. It shows us what's going on in different parts of the world. And now I'll ask Claire to talk to us about somewhere a bit closer to home in Derbyshire.
Okay. Oh, okay. So can everyone hear me? We're all good? So today I'm going to talk to you about the Derbyshire Dale Swift project. And I'm going to cover 6 main areas. I'm going to talk about why there's a need for the project, what the barriers limiting swift conservation, what we aim to achieve, the approach our project is taking, what we found out so far, and then I'll just touch quickly on our future plans. So first off, why is there a need for our project? Why do it? So the first thing to understand is that there's no national strategy in the UK for conserving swifts. So there's not a coordinated national plan to save swifts. So they're not a protected species beyond protection during breeding season, which again is really limited. Now, if you compare this to bats, they're European and UK protected species, and they've actually seen their numbers stabilise in recent years. But our swifts are still an urban species, and they face very similar threats to their breeding sites through to building restoration and new build design. And the second thing is there isn't yet enough research to understand why it is they're in decline. Now, we know that insects have declined across Europe, their numbers have plummeted, whereas our migrant birds have evolved to come north and take advantage of this bounty. And we've got lots of nest sites. Well, in the UK, they normally nest in old buildings, usually older than 1945. And then you've got climate change likely to interact with other factors. So, for example, if you look in this bottom, in this bottom figure, you can see as temperatures go up, bumblebee numbers are going down, and that's replayed across other insect orders. So really, we don't have a standard approach to save swifts. So now you can see that our lack of nationwide action starts to make a bit more sense because it reflects that we don't really know what to do to conserve them. And the third thing to know about the UK is that most of the conservation for swifts is done by volunteers. So there's a really strong volunteer-driven effort to save swifts. But even our larger city projects, they're volunteer-based. So you can see now that conserving swifts successfully, at least in the UK, is just facing a whole host of barriers. So for a start, there's not enough information to act effectively. So, for example, does supplying artificial nests always work? Why do swifts use them sometimes, but other times they really don't? And number 2, in the UK, we're running out of time. We've got 68% decline, so we're really running out of time. Number 3, we don't have standard methods to survey swifts that work really well. So, for example, swifts are, as you all know, aerial insectivores. They cover huge distances, so they're really hard to census in the air using transects, and it's really not easy to get reliable population estimates. So we haven't really got the data to understand what's happening. And number 4, we've touched on before, those taking action are usually volunteers, so most of the time they're working with very limited support. So how are we going to take action to conserve swifts if we don't really know what works? So these same problems, they play out in Derbyshire. There's a huge gap in our knowledge, and we don't have a complete picture of the distribution or number of swift colonies in Derbyshire. So we still don't know where most swifts are nesting, meaning we can't take action to protect these nests. And the Derbyshire Dales, as an example, we've got very little information, even for our 14 bigger towns and villages. So this is really where our project comes in, because we're trying to fill in all these blanks. So we're doing this by gathering information in a consistent way, pulling the information together, and trying to get a detailed picture of swift numbers and distribution across the Derbyshire Dales area. So there's steps of the basis of our approach. We start to accurately census breeding swifts, give a risk score to known swift nest sites, identify swift hotspots, plan where to install our nest boxes, and then we place our nest boxes where we think they're going to be most needed. So our project goal is to prevent swifts disappearing from our landscape, which is a goal much of you share. And our aim specifically is to enable swift conservation in the Derbyshire Dales by providing data to support decision-making, conserving and increasing nest site availability, and looking to develop a conservation model that can be upscaled and then applied elsewhere. So step 1, we look to build an evidence-based case for swift conservation. Because if we can contribute data to our decision makers, then we can advocate effectively for swift conservation. As an example, in Derbyshire, we've successfully advocated for the inclusion of swift conservation policy within our local nature recovery strategies. So step 2, we can act. We can act to conserve and increase nest site availability. So we look to identify the location of existing nest sites and to ensure they're protected. And we look to supplement our natural nests and artificial nests, providing nest sites for swifts on new and existing buildings. And we work with our partners, which is the Derbyshire Dales District Council, to have mandatory swift bricks in all our new homes. So step 3, we're starting to create our best practice conservation model for swifts. Now, UK projects have shown us that an increase in swift nest sites can boost local populations. But we've still got this crucial question of how these successes can be actually scaled up. So this is where our project can make a real impact, because it's designed to begin to answer this, because we're trying to test, learn and develop our conservation strategy through our project. So just to give you a bit of background about how our project began, it began in Roseley, which is a teeny village, and Derbyshire Swift Conservation has run a 4-year project here since 2021, and this has allowed us to develop our best practice conservation approach for swifts that we're now ready to apply and test further in 10 towns across the Derbyshire Dales. So these are our locations. Now the larger circles, larger human population, not necessarily larger swift populations actually, because we've got really good populations in some of our teeny villages, and we call these our swift hotspots. So how does our conservation model actually work? Well, we've got 3 stages: surveying, where we identify the location of every nest; risk assessment, who owns the building, might it be renovated, what are the chances that we could actually intervene; and finally, our mitigation, where we install nest boxes where they'll be most effective, trying to create our alternative nest sites. So what's key to our approach is that we were really consistent in how we surveyed and measured. So we used a standardized survey method and a survey form, and we've used 2 main survey methods. The first one is survey walks or street surveys, where surveyors literally walk the street transect, recording whether no nests are active and also looking for new nests. And then our second method, which is a constant effort static count, statics for shorts, where we survey every location 1 hour to observers. So why bother to do the 2 methods? Well, to begin with, our static count is a constant effort technique, meaning you do every count for exactly the same length of time. Now, constant effort counts are really our best design to be able to compare sites across different years or different places, because if you're not using the same effort between your different sites, then you can't really compare anything else reliably. All you can really do is map your nest distribution. So, for example, you then can't say whether a location is good for swifts, better than over here. You can't compare one year to another. However, surveying every nest as a point or perhaps a small cluster of nests, well, that takes time, and we've just got volunteers. So it's not possible for our volunteers to survey all the nests in this way. So we do some of our nest surveys as transects, meaning lines, not points. And our survey walks, they work best when you've got several nests you can take in on your short walk, and they work really well when we're trying to cover a lot of area. So how often and how long do we survey? Well, each survey location is visited at least twice. And sometimes on busy streets we go back 3, 4, 5 times. But we're actually trying to trial 3 definite visits in May, June and July in our coming season. And we always allow a survey duration of a minimum of 1 hour for each survey. So what have we got up to so far? Well, we've been surveying to locate and count our swift nests. So in 2025, we worked with swift groups to recruit volunteers. We provided training events, guidance and materials. And our volunteers carried out an average of 20 surveys at each site, giving in total about 170 sites across our region. And we've done surveys in 11 locations, including working with Chatsworth Estate, landowners, and also community projects like Wild Skies Project. So this is what we found. In our 11 locations, 358 swift nests, and they were nearly all natural nest sites in buildings. We've only got 10 pairs actually nesting in a box at the moment. And the other thing this figure tells us is the value of citizen science. Because right there, 86 volunteers, they did nearly 690 person hours. Now, if you imagine if you'd paid ecologists however many euros an hour to actually carry out those surveys, think how valuable our volunteers are. So the next stage is to use our data to plan our nest box installation. So we've created a detailed map. We looked at abundance, distribution, location of swift nests, and we use QGIS. And we use this to plan our nest installation, looking at the layout of the colonies and the nests that were at risk. And then we've gone on to install our first nest boxes in the Dales. So I just want to give you a bit of an insight into how we created our Swift map and then how we make use of this tool to plan our actual nest box strategies. So first off, why do a map? Well, a map helps us picture the distribution and number of our Swift nests. It allows us to compare changes between years, compare differences between sites, and we can see the patterns, for example, in at-risk nests. And then we can use this data and we use it to map our target areas for action. So we're planning our nest box installation, we use our map, and we pull that together with the local knowledge of all our teams who've always got a good handle on the local knowledge and history of a place. So this is what our map looks like. It's in QGIS, so it's a live map. So when you're actually looking at it, you can zoom in to different scales and you can look at different layers. Now we've mapped our nests as buildings. So each red dot is a building with swift nests, and the brighter the red, the more swift nests. Now we also mapped our swifts in terms of risk, and we used a really simple system. We did a traffic light system, red, amber, green. So our red nests are those that we're worried about, and our green nests are those that have swift champions and are well looked after. So this is tides well, and the red nest, well, that tends to be to do with property ownership. It could be that the property is about to change in ownership, or it could be the type of ownership, because a lot of rented properties are really run down, and therefore we've got a red flag on them to keep an eye on them. So our data now all is tied to our map. So our GIS map is now our new data set, and it's storing all our Swift records and connecting it to a location. So for example, if you look at this one highlighted red point, this is called the Sideways House. It's in Wirksworth, and we can call up all the historical records we have for that site linked to our map. So next stage, we're using our map to do a kind of a risk assessment for the swift nests in each location. So we're using our map really to help us visualize the natural distribution of nests and also where the nests are that are most at risk. And we're then identify target areas working with our Swift teams, and we use our target areas to plan our nest box installation. So this map here, this is Bradwell, and you can see our first target area in the north of the village, which is the very aptly named Swift Close. So our target areas were identified using 3 main criteria. The first one was expansion of the Swift colony. So for example, we might try to move nest sites, making them available in modern housing estates where currently there's just no natural nests. No nest cavities, nothing for sparrows, swifts, any kind of urban birds. And this is the case in Bradwell, where we've started to put nest boxes into the north where it's all the modern housing. Number 2, improving connectivity between small isolated colony clusters. So for example, we might look to create a bit of an expansion link between isolated pockets of nesting swifts where they're still healthy but they've got nowhere to expand. And lastly, we do specific mitigations on or around key buildings at risk. And it might be a building like the Sideways House that I showed you earlier, that's been a really key building, lots of nests, but it's due to be renovated. Or it might be where you've got social housing where they're about to go in and do systematic roof repairs down a street. So we'd look to do targeted mitigations there. So finally, we get to take action. We get to put up boxes and feel like we've made a positive difference. So let's go back to Bradwell, which is our little case study. So we've got 42 natural nests in Bradwell, but actually at least a third of them we were worried about, and we'd had red flags on that they were at risk. So the rationale for our target area is that all new housing was in the north and the east of our little town, and there was no nest provision here, but we did know that there were natural nests nearby. So targeting here would allow for our colony expansion into the north of the village. And so we've worked with a community housing company in order to identify residents that were actually eligible for a box. We didn't just go and put boxes up anywhere. We looked at houses where it was going to work. And so we went on then, we've installed our first 15 boxes were at Swift Close in March of this year. So just finally, I want to talk about our future plans. Now what we're hoping to do is we're looking to develop a dedicated survey app that would allow our surveyors or other surveyors to link into our GIS map. So this would enable a standard approach for Swift monitoring. and it would make Swift survey data better, more accurate, more consistent, and it would make life a lot easier for our volunteers. So this is really, I would say, the holy grail for Swift monitoring. Now, we do have a first version, which we're hoping to test with 10 or 20 volunteers this summer. But really, at this stage, we're just hoping to get proof of concept so that we can go on and get further funding. Because our project is we only have funding for 2 years. This is our second year. We're looking for ways to continue gathering data and learning. So what we want our app to be able to do is it's got to be easy for volunteers to access. So we've made it so that you can access it on your mobile phone. Everyone has a mobile phone pretty much. It's got to be easy to use, so it's got to be easy to read, easy to navigate. It's got to link directly to that high-quality map. So you can just locate your building on the map and go, there's a Swift nest here. So it's going to enable data to be collected in a standard and repeatable way, which is really going to boost the quality of data. Because one of the things we'd found as a charity is that records coming in, they're really variable. And there's no chance of surveyors going back and being able to find those records again, because all manner of descriptions were coming in. So it's great we've logged a nest for that year, but how do we monitor it? How do we protect it? How do we find it again? So this is where our surveying is really important. And another thing that it will do is reduce hours and hours of data entry, because again, like in our charity, that's usually done by volunteers. So that's another thing of hours of time. Okay, well, I'm going to finish there. That finishes my talk, but I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Good for you, and on time.